Some people call me a pretentious anime snob, and that's very accurate. So, full disclosure, I did drop Hero Academia about halfway into season 2. That said, I also gave it upwards of 20 episodes. I gave this anime more than a fair shot, and honestly, I regret not dropping it sooner. I kept waiting on it to get better. I kept waiting to see what all the hype was about, but I just never got it. But why did I give up on it? It's because, to me, Hero Academia just rubs off as really basic. Total honesty, I'm getting pretty burned out on superpower school anime. There's always been a lot of them, sure, but as the number of anime getting made increases, so too do the number of superpower school anime, to the point where there is just a plain glut of them. It's becoming harder and harder for them to really stand out to me. I mean, sure, Little Witch Academia is fun, and the light novels for a certain magical index are godlike, but you gotta figure that for every Witch Academia or magical index, there's like a dozen other significantly less good superpower school anime that all draw inspiration from the same places, use the same kinds of characters, the same kinds of plot twists, over and over again. It's boring, it's repetitive, and, you know, after a while you just get sick of it, and unfortunately, Hero Academia just doesn't stand out enough to separate itself from those kinds of titles. But don't get me wrong, I don't hate it, necessarily. To even say I dislike it is kind of a stretch. I just don't like it, either. It feels really plain to me. It feels like I've already seen it. I sat here trying to think if it had any standout scenes to me, but still, nothing comes to mind. But even though it didn't do anything cool or interesting or memorable, it didn't really do anything bad, either. I mean, except for failing to stand out, obviously, which is a problem in and of itself. But if anime were ice cream flavors, Hero Academia is the most vanilla of vanilla with no toppings, and I'm more of a pistachio person. But I know a lot of fans of Hero Academia will say that it's not necessarily the story itself or the concept that people love, but that it's the characters. And honestly, I don't feel attached to any of the characters either. The only ones that don't feel like one-note caricatures of who they were meant to be are Deku and All Might. But even then, there are 2 out of, God, how many named characters? There's actually a word for this phenomenon, a fancy little word. It's called flanderization, and I've even heard avid fans of Hero Academia agree that the anime has a lot of that going on, so at least I'm not alone in that regard. I will give Toradora some leeway because I did end up dropping it pretty quickly. So for all I know, it could have been amazing, but I will never know because I got so impatient with the first few episodes. That said, I dropped it so quickly because I could not take Taiga. There are not many anime character tropes in anime that get on my nerves as badly as an extreme tsundere like Taiga. And I just couldn't take it. I couldn't. I've heard she gets better as the series progresses, and I'm sure that's true. I'm sure it has some really heartwarming moments or something, but oh my god. I just do not have the patience to deal with the tsundere main character with as much screen time as Taiga. In fact, that's why Rei is the best Evangelion girl. It's a less good ripoff of Dot Hack. Characters are all one-note tropes made out of cardboard. Kirito is not a badass or cool. He's just a generic shonen protagonist with plot armor that's almost as thick as Jesus Yamato from Gundam Seeds. There's not a single drop of originality anywhere to be found, blah 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 blah. You have probably heard all this before. You see, Sao finds itself in a very interesting position because Sao is basically the mascot for anime that are popular but not generally well-liked in anime communities because most of the people who like it are new to anime, they're like 14 years old or younger, and they just haven't developed a solid taste for anime yet because they just haven't been exposed to it as much. Therefore, their expectations and standards are wildly different from other people who've seen maybe a good-sized handful of anime, let alone jaded, elitist, asshole anime fans like me that are just perpetually unimpressed. But you know, that's okay. It really is. I feel like it's a really weird rite of passage in anime fans to liking at least one really awful anime when they're just starting to get into it, you know? I mean, I no longer like at least half of the anime I thought were brilliant when I was 12, and I know that sounds really pretentious, but I mean it. Maybe an example will illustrate this better. When I was 12, I thought DN Angel was the most clever piece of fiction ever. It was so brilliant, and spoiler alert, it's very far from that. And I think Sao is gonna be for this younger, newer generation of anime fans what DN Angel is to me. It's garbage, absolutely, for sure, but it's garbage that became a meaningful stepping stone toward developing a solid taste for anime. I always try to watch any new horror anime coming out. Horror is actually my favorite genre, and yet Tokyo Ghoul still somehow found a way to bore me. Most of its problems can be traced back to its two biggest ones. First off, that every character is either a Mary Sue or Gary Stu. Kaneki and Toka, in particular, are extremely dull protagonists that I just feel no emotions for. Secondly, the writing in general is extremely contrived. If you could buy scripts for anime at a store, Tokyo Ghoul is the mass-produced generic brand one that you got on clearance at the dollar store. And I figured at the time it came out that it was just gonna be another flavor of the month kind of anime that's popular while it airs, you know, gets a little bit of merch at the old Tot Topic, sells enough of said merch to get a second season, maybe a little more merch, then everyone's just gonna immediately forget about it and move on to next season's show. And yet somehow to this very day, I still cannot step into an anime convention without running into at least a dozen people wearing those frankly uncomfortable looking masks. Ah, Black Butler. This is a bit of a unique entry on this list because I will fully admit, I actually thought it was okay when I first watched it. I was never really in love with it, but I did think it was pretty decent. I thought it was quite watchable, but I was also 14 years old and somehow had worse taste in anime than I do now. But now that I'm older and much wiser and much more of a jaded, elitist anime asshole, I cannot get through a single episode without being constantly reminded about how awful the characters became. Like, I know I gave shit to Hero Academia for turning a lot of its characters into one-note caricatures of themselves, but Black Butler does this twice as bad as Hero Academia. Remember that fancy little word I gave you guys earlier? Flanderization? Well, that is what Black Butler is all about. It is so rampant, and the worst part about the Flanderization in Black Butler is that it just does not seem to have any remorse in having it. I swear, if you look up Flanderization in a dictionary, right next to the picture of Ned Flanders, you will see Grell, and right next to him, Sebastian, and then Shiel, and Undertaker, and Lizzie. On a list full of generic shonen anime, Akame ga Kill is by far the most generic. I remember watching the first 5 episodes, and I kid you not, successfully predicting every major event that happened because I just followed the trail of tropes like they were breadcrumbs. It is the anime equivalent of when you are sending a message on your phone and it predicts exactly what you're gonna say next because you've already said it so many times now. But, kinda like Hero Academia, I can see how people who haven't wasted years of their life on anime like me could like this series, because it's gonna be harder to predict and it would feel a lot fresher. But this is a video on my thoughts on anime, and come on, we're this far into the video, surely by now you've realized that I'm quite a bit harder to please than most other anime fans. Oh, Elfen Lied. Here's a pretty unique entry on this list. So I don't really hear many people talking about it anymore, but about a decade ago, God, yeah, I know I'm old, it was pretty well liked by the edgier of the anime crowd. Anyway, Elfen Lied is a gore fest, but that's all it is. It's an over-the-top gore fest with no actual substance, alright? You remove the gore and it just has nothing left but unexplored plot points, bad pacing, and boring characters. It's using its excessive gore as a crutch. But at the time it came out, there weren't too many other over-the-top gorefest anime that were currently coming out, and I suspect that's why it got so much attention when it first came out. But you know, these days we have series like When They Cry, we have Shiki, Devilman Crybaby. Dare I mention the king of the gorefest anime? Dare I bring another into this? My point is, there's a pretty fair selection of gorefest anime that also have interesting stories, good characters, good writing. We have gore-fest anime with substance. And I think that's a big part of why Elfen Lied has just aged so especially poorly, because we've seen what a truly good gore-fest anime can look like. And it's just not Elfen Lied. Compared to its competition, it's lacking. But also because it was just never a good anime in the first place. But on a closing note, I will give points where they are due. Lilium is one of the greatest anime openings of all time, and I will blast it anytime, any day, for any reason. Here's another one that I have a complicated relationship with. The first half of the 2003 FMA is great. In fact, it's better than Brotherhood's rushed recap. Absolutely. But after that first half, basically once they ran out of source material and had to start making the story up, which is actually what happened, I know, that's when the quality took a sharp turn for the worse that it just never recovered from. I remember being halfway through it and feeling just really bored. Like it was a trudge to get through. The story felt rushed and hollow and like it just wasn't living up to its potential. There were good ideas there, but they were just never focused on, or they got rushed and glossed over. And that first half being as excellent as it was, it just made the increasing amount of flaws that this second half had all the more apparent. I was actually really hesitant to start Brotherhood once it came out because the first FMA series was so underwhelming, but I'm really glad I did. Brotherhood, quite contrary to the 2003 series, is extremely excellent. I dare say it's one of my all-time favorite anime. If it didn't rush through the flashbacks in the beginning of the series and treated them with the same care as they did in the 2003 series, it would be pretty close to perfect, but alas, I guess it just wasn't meant to be. In any case, my point is, the 2003 FMA was lackluster enough as it was. Knowing that Brotherhood is just as available and leagues better, I mean, come on, what's even the point of the 2003 series now? It's just another Fujoshi-based series with zero actual substance, but was popular anyway because Fujoshi, it's a tale as old as time. Yes, Serial Experiments Lain. More like Serial Experiments Lain. Yeah, I bet you've never heard that joke before. Now, before you just dismiss this entry, just saying, oh, well, it's too deep for her, she doesn't get it, which, I mean, to be fair, might be true. Let me explain my thought process to you. This is my issue with Lain. I do not mind artsy, metaphorical anime. I mean, hell, Utena, Penguin Drum, and the Tatami Galaxy are some of my all-time favorites. But the difference between those anime and Lain is that those anime all still have a cohesive surface level story going on. Lain, on the other hand, has no such thing. And for me, having a cohesive surface level story, even if it's meant to take back seat to the metaphorical meaning, is still an important thing to have. I mean, how should I, the viewer, be expected to understand what's happening on screen is deep and symbolic if I don't understand what's literally happening on screen? In many ways, it reminds me of modern art. Works by artists like Rothko and Pollock that don't necessarily look good or have much technical value, but instead their artistic genius lies in the ideas that went behind their work and how they affected art at the time, how they pushed art and what that means to its utmost limits and how people interpreted the works. It's a genre of art that tends to be a lot more emotional and thought-provoking than others, because it's a lot more subjective, and it's extremely understandable why some people would prefer it. But I'm not one of them. I ride or I die by the works of Raphael. Well, my god, that's the whole list, isn't it? Now, by now, I'm sure you're all itching to get to the comments section to tell me all about how awful my taste is and how I'm wrong, yada yada yada, and that's probably true. So go ahead. Go for it. I mean, it's only fair, right? As a matter of fact, I'll make your job easier. I'll leave a link to my anime list in the description so you can go ahead and pick apart my favorite anime. In fact, I'll make it even easier for you and tell you right off the bat. My absolute favorites are One Piece, Shiki, Death Note, Monster, and Mawaru Penguin Drum. One Piece especially, oh my god, it's such a low-hanging fruit. You can absolutely talk shit on One Piece, I promise. As a matter of fact, if you don't, I might. That could be a video in the future. As a matter of fact, for bonus points, while you're in the comments section, I'm actually really curious to hear about any popular anime that you guys don't like. Especially for these more popular series when the general anime community seems to be nothing but an echo chamber for positive feedback for these kind of shows. I'm really interested in hearing about what people have to say to critique them. So, by all means, let me know some of your more unpopular anime opinions about popular series you don't like, why you don't like them. Especially if it's One Piece. by the way, did I mention that I'm on Patreon now? Because I am. I'll leave a link to it in the description, and you should totally go check it out in case you're interested in supporting your favorite ginger weeaboo.